This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So today is Saturday, February 8th, 2025. To move on to the second chapter of the book that I'm now working on, Putting Down the Bundle, Blue Cliff Record, Case 4. Te-shan, if you'll remember, the noted scholar of the Diamond Sutra, had set off with the clear intention of wiping out the Zen devils in the south. Fortunately for him and for us, he fell into Master Lungtan's dragon pond. Candle blown out, he found his face from before his parents were even born. Awakening beyond his notes on the Diamond Sutra, he found the real diamond. Again, please remember, teisho is a form of zazen. Unless there's something you need to move to because something is too painful, please don't make unnecessary movements. Even on Zoom, you're in the Zendo. And so this is a form of formal practice, okay? So even though he was still the same old Te-shan, only now, even so, he found the real diamond, he was still the same old Te-shan, only now his super confidence had swung 180 degrees around. Fresh off his deep realization, he set out to check himself against or even correct the noted teachers of his time. Zen Master Jiao-chu, Joshu in Japanese, famously said, "If I meet a child of 9 who can teach me, I'll learn from them. If I meet someone of 90 who can learn from me, I'll teach them." That is, if I meet a child of 9 who can teach me, I'll learn from them. Yeah. So if it's someone very old, I'll teach them. He was 60 at the time he set off, his initial realization having been around the age of 19, full realization at 56. And given the Confucian standards of his time, his willingness to be taught by a child or to teach an elder was actually startling. Te-shan, on the other hand, was a young man just fresh off the mark. So, our second koan here about Te-shan reveals what happened after he left Lungtan, eager to check his realization against the best minds of his generation, which is a quote from Allen Ginsberg's Howl. This is Blue Cliff Record, Case 4, and this is how the case goes. When Te-shan, or Tokusan in Japanese, came to Keui-shan, that would be Isan in Japanese, when he came to his temple, he carried his pilgrim's bundle with him into the Buddha hall, where he crossed from east to west and west to east. Keui-shan sat quietly doing zazen. Looking around, Te-shan said, "Nothing, nothing," and went out. Shuido, who put together the initial 100 cases of the Blue Cliff Record, comments, "Completely exposed." Te-shan got to the monastery gate, but then said to himself, "I shouldn't be so crude." So he re-entered the hall in the prescribed manner for the meeting. We'll get into what this is talking about. And as Keui-shan sat there, Te-shan holding up his kneeling cloth, was going to put that down and do his prostrations, as formerly a monk should, said, "Master." And Keui-shan made as if to take up his ceremonial whisk, whereupon Te-shan shouted, "Cuts!" and left with a sweep of his sleeves. Shuido comments, "Completely exposed." Te-shan, turning his back on the hall, put on his straw sandals and departed. That evening, Keui-shan, the teacher who was there, the abbot, asked the head monk, "Where is that newcomer?" The head monk said, "When he went out, he turned his back on the Buddha hall, put on his straw sandals, and departed." Keui-shan said, "Hereafter, that fellow will go to the summit of an isolated peak, establish a hermitage, and scold the Buddhas and abuse the patriarchs." Shuido comments, adding frost to snow. Adding frost to snow. So the case asks that we grasp Te-shan's condition and intention. Why does he break with monastic conventions, storm in, peer around, announce nothing, nothing, and leave, despite the noted teacher Keui-shan sitting right there? Is he like Chao Chu, beyond convention with no need to adhere to societal rules? Is that Zen's freedom? I'm free, I can do whatever I want. Would Chao Chu have done this? What's your take? Back in the early 70s, before I go on to that, let me just add, so monastic rules would have been a traveling monk would come in, first ask the guest monk for access, that is a meeting with the teacher or the abbot, then put on if accepted, would put on formal robes, would, out of their bundle that they, carry like a backpack with them, with their robes, their bowl, maybe a little money in case they should die on the road to cover a cheap funeral, sewing needle, that's kind of about it, some thread. That may be a razor to shave their head. That's what's in the bundle that he's carrying. He was supposed to have taken out, put on his robes, taken out his bowing cloth, put that down, formally requested an audience, and talked to the teacher in a very formal way, and then been allowed from there to enter the zendo and sit with the monks. He just walks in with his bundle and goes, nothing, nothing. And you can see it's complete break with convention. So now, back to the chapter. Back in the early 70s, a Zen friend created a brilliant April Fool's edition of Zenbo, the Rochester Zen Center's official publication. Back then, Zenbo was just a mimeoed newsletter, not a glossy magazine, and under the title heading was its banner line, "The mind of a Zen adept is taut like a drawn bow." Taut, T-A-U-T. Like a drawn bow, Now, our friend's one-issue joke zine was titled Zen Bugle, and it sported under its title this little gem: "The mind of a Zen adept is blown like a bugle." The mind of a Zen adept is blown like a bugle. Te-shan might have enjoyed that. Now, to back up a bit, in our curriculum, Blue Cliff Record, Hekikenroku in Japanese, Pianlu Chinese, is the second formal book of koans we examine after the Gateless Barrier. It's such a deeply poetic text that Da Wei, his dates are 1089 to 1163, the heir of Wan Wu, who created the completed Blue Cliff Record, which was based on Shuido's initial compilation, burned its printing blocks to prevent Zen students back then from getting hooked on its literary beauty and failing to realize its transformative power. In an odd twist, this Linji, that's Rinzai, training text so impressed Zen master Dogen, 1200 to 1253, founder of Japanese Soto tradition, which typically no longer uses koans in Doksan-based training. They do more of like, what's that called? Conversation, kind of literary group conversation. Salon, right, thanks. Talking about, and I did that in graduate school with literature. One can be very good at that, and I wouldn't say it opens up the koan. However, I don't know. I've never done that with koans. I've always done it one-on-one with the teacher. In any case, it so impressed Zen Master Dogen, he stayed up all night, his last night in China before he left, because he discovered it supposedly that night, and stayed up and hand-copied the entire text before getting on the boat the next morning to leave to return to Japan. Again, ironically, he was so moved by Blue Cliff Record, and yet Soto tradition no longer does one-on-one Doksan work, though they do, again, many, though I can't say that's, let's put it this way, typically not so. However, of course, our own lineage, which is Harada Roshi, who's a Soto priest, worked with the Rinzai teacher, Dokton Roshi, and did the koan curriculum. He felt it was very important to have confirmed realization, and then that became the Harada Yasutani, his student, koan lineage that we work on, that Eiken Roshi, Diamond Sangha does, Kaplo lineage does, as do others. It's become the most prevalent koan tradition, actually, in the West, though there is still straight rinzai as well. In any case, funny how history moves things around. In any case, to the case. Carrying his bundle, as I've said, means that Te-shan as a monk carried what all ordained members of the Buddhist community or Sangha would have with them: formal robes, bowing cloth, bowls, utensil, needle, thread, and a bit of money for a cheap burial. And he should have gone through the formal request for an entrance to the zendo, which meant a formal interview with the teacher. When granted, then coming before the teacher in formal robes, making full prostrations. But Te-shan just marches in with his bundle, monk's bundle, unopened, peers aggressively around. And the noted teacher and abbot, Keui-shan, is seated right there and just goes, "Nothing, nothing," and then charges off again. So first question here is, what's up with Keui-shan? Why does he just sit there unmoving? Maybe we can say, actually, that's the second question. First question is really, what's Te-shan up to? What's he doing? And why is Keui-shan just sit there? Koan interchanges, known as mondo, create a kind of Dharma music, an improvisational Zen jazz in which an opening solo is followed by an answering riff, which swings back then to the original soloist, and it continues in this way back and forth, each participant working off the other, essentially creating a music that would be inaccessible to just one performer alone. I prefer this kind of collaborative musical metaphor to the more traditional martial one that views mondo as a Dharma duel or combat. Yet, though we have two talented musicians here, the music seems rather muted. Keui-shan just sits quietly. Even when things get lively from Te-shan, there's no real response from him. So is he saying, "Leave me alone, I'm doing zazen"? Is he incapable of rising to the challenge? At their second meeting, and why is there a second meeting, he makes one slight move and starts to raise his fly whisk. The whisk is a ritual implement symbolizing authority and compassion. That is respect for all life, because it brushes insects away without killing them. So it's like a kotsu, a teacher's official authority sign. Raising the whisk means he's about to take up his formal role as teacher. That is, he's switching from this person completely gone in zazen to taking up his role in this life. That's what's about to happen. Why does he do that then? And why does Te-shan shout, "Cuts!" and leave? When Te-shan first entered carrying his bundle, he looked around, said, "Nothing, nothing," and left. Then he checked himself, returned, began to take up the official monastic forms. But this too quickly goes awry. Why? And all the action is 99% on his side. Keui-shan just makes one tiny move. Has he been overwhelmed by this lively newcomer? Now, a bit of background on Keui-shan should make it clear that that seems rather unlikely. And this is from Transmission of the Lamp, which is a 30-volume work of putative biographies of Zen Buddhist ancestors and prominent monks that was written in the Song dynasty. The text here with an edit or two is from a book titled Original Teachings of Chan, Buddhism by Chung Yuan, which came out in 1969. So Chan Master Keui-shan Lingyu was a native of Fuchu, Changchi in Fuchu. His original name was Chao. When he was 15, he left his parents and became a monk. In Te-shan Monastery in his native town, he studied under the Vinaya master, Fa Chang, and had his head shaved. Vinaya, the ethical, moral teachings. Quite a set of them for monks. Later, he was ordained, became, formally. He started as a young person with shaving his head, and then really received full ordination and devoted himself after that to the study of sutras and Vinayas of both the Mahayana and Hinayana. At the age of 23, he visited Master Bo-chang Wei-hai, one of the great teachers, Wei-hai. And as soon as the master saw this new visitor, he gave him permission to study in the temple. And Keui-shan became Bo-chang's leading disciple, very young. It's quite impressive. So one day Keui-shan was attending his master Bo-chang, and who asked him, "Who are you?" And Keui-shan answered, "I'm Ling Yu." That was his given name. "Poke the fire pot and see if there's still some fire in it," is what Bo-chang said. Keui-shan did that and said, no fire. Then Master Po-chang rose from his seat, poked deep in the fire with metal tongs, and extracted a small glowing piece of charcoal. Holding it up, he said, "Is this not fire?" And at this, Keui-shan was awakened. Case 40 of the Gateless Barrier focuses on Keui-shan. It's titled "Keui-shan Kicks Over the Water Bottle." It goes like this. When Keui-shan was studying under Baichang, he worked as the cook at the monastery. Baichang wanted to choose a founding teacher for a new settlement, a new monastery on Mount Keui. So he summoned the head monk and the rest of the disciples and told them that an exceptional person should go there. He took a water bottle, set it on the floor, and said, "Don't call this a water bottle. What would you call it?" The head monk said, "It can't be called a wooden clog." Baichang then asked Keui-shan his opinion. Keui-shan kicked over the water bottle and walked out. Baichang laughed and said, "The head monk loses." Keui-shan thereupon was made the founding teacher of Mount Keui. Finally, here's a teaching moment from Keui-shan. This is again from the original teachings of Chan Buddhism. The master came to the assembly and said, "After I've passed away, I shall become a water buffalo at the foot of the mountain. On the left side of the buffalo's chest, 5 characters, Keui-shan Monk Ling Yu, will be inscribed. At that time you may call me the monk of Keui-shan, but at the same time I shall be the water buffalo. When you call me water buffalo, I am also the monk of Keui-shan. What is my correct name?" The master propagated the teachings of Chan for more than 40 years. Numerous followers achieved self-realization, and 41 disciples penetrated to the final profundity of his teaching. On the 9th day of the first month, year 853 of the Tang Dynasty, the master washed, 7th year of the Tang Dynasty, first month of the 7th year of the Tang, he washed his face, rinsed his mouth, seated himself in zazen, and smiling, passed away. This was 64 years after his ordination. He was 83 years old. His posthumous name from the royal court was Great Perfection. So Keui-shan, who has been sitting there in this case, was no slouch. Yet here he hardly seems able to make a move. And why at each conclusion to their interaction or non-interaction does Shuido, compiler of the 100 cases of the Blue Cliff record, respond with completely exposed? And why does he say it not once, but twice? Now, at the conclusion of the case, Keui-shan inquires about the newcomer and learns that Te-shan has, quote, "turned his back on the Buddha hall and departed," unquote. We're not simply told, "Oh, that guy, he left." Why? Is there a point here? Keui-shan then responds, "Hereafter that fellow will go to the summit of an isolated peak, establish a hermitage, and scold the Buddhas and abuse the patriarchs." So, is he praising Te-shan, prophesying what this lively monk will one day achieve? Or is he criticizing him? Is it either, neither, or both? Why does Shuido conclude with adding frost to snow? And why does he even include this story in his koan collection? How does knowing this seemingly failed encounter help us? What does it have to do with our wisdom and compassion? A koan from the Gateless Barrier may help. Case 46, Xishuang step forward from the top of the pole, includes this. Master Xishuang said, "How do you step forward from the top of a 100-foot pole? Another eminent master of former times said, "You who sit on the top of a 100-foot pole, although you have entered the way, it is not yet genuine. Take a step from the top of the pole, and the worlds of the 10 directions are your total body." Now look, it can take years of effort, sacrifice, sweat, and tears to make it to the top of the 100-foot pole. But is staying up there, isolated and vastly alone, the point? Then again, how do you step from the top of a pole? And how about Te-shan? Where's he at? And what is genuineness or maturity in Zen practice? What does it come down to? In the previous koan, if you remember, Te-shan carried his backpack hundreds of miles, sure that it contained all the wisdom that he or the world would ever need. Yet by the end of that koan, he'd burned all those cherished notes, saying they added up to no more than a few drops of water tossed into a great ravine. In this koan, having already cast off all his pointless, useless knowledge, to again quote Bob Dylan, Tombstone Blues, he carries his sacred monk's bundle hundreds of miles to Keui-shan's monastery, and yet once there he tosses even it, metaphorically, into that same vast ravine, hardly seeming to even know what to do with it. What still remains for him to understand or do? In the third and final koan of Te-shan's pilgrimage to maturity, which we'll take up next time, we'll return to the Gateless Barrier. And in the case that we'll take up then, Te-shan is now an elder teacher, and in that case he carries something, but it's nothing more than his own lunch bowls. And yet, well, we'll see what happens. And that will conclude the really first, maybe third of this new book, which is Te-shan Carries His Backpack, Te-shan Carries His Bundle, and Te-shan Carries His Lunch Bowls. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all.